Hey there. Tonight you're about to drift back through time. Back 7,000 years to when your ancestors faced a brutal choice. Build or die. Welcome to another bedtime documentary where history meets peaceful slumber. Before we begin our journey to 5000 BCE, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is as you settle in for the night. Are you tucked under warm blankets while outside the modern world continues its endless rush? Perfect. So, dim the lights, adjust your pillows, and let your breathing slow as we travel to a time when the sound of stone striking stone echoed through primeval forests. Tonight, you'll witness how your prehistoric ancestors, without a single piece of metal, without wheels, without even proper writing, managed to build fortresses that would make modern engineers scratch their heads in wonder. You'll walk beside a young fortress builder named Danu as he transforms from an apprentice to a master architect, all while surviving raids, starvation, and the crushing weight of stone that claimed so many lives. Close your eyes if you wish. The story will paint itself behind your eyelids. You stand beside Danu on a windswept hilltop in what will one day be called Britain, though for now it's simply home. The year means nothing to you. Time is measured in seasons, in births and deaths, in raids survived. Your 16-year-old body aches from yesterday's labor, hauling stones up this cursed slope. The morning mist clings to the valley below like the spirits of the dead, and you can smell the smoke from your clan's fires mixing with the earthen scent of freshly dug soil. Your master, old Gorak, with his scarred hands and bent back, points to a pile of massive stones that need moving. Each one weighs more than 3 men, and you have only wooden levers, rope made from plant fibers, and the strength of desperate people who know that without walls, the next raid will be their last. The rival clan from the eastern valleys has been spotted 2 days away. Their warriors carry clubs embedded with sharp flint that can crack skulls like eggs. You grip your stone hammer, a river rock bound with sinew to an ash handle, and wonder if you'll live long enough to see these walls completed. Around you, 30 of your clan members begin the ancient song of labor, their voices rising with the sun, giving rhythm to work that will either save or break them. You crouch beside Gorak as he reveals the secret that has been passed down through 12 generations of builders. With a stick, he draws in the dirt, showing you how the stones must overlap like the scales of a fish, each one locking its brothers in place. Without mortar, without cement, only friction and weight will hold your fortress together. You've seen the ruins of failed walls, where improper placement led to collapse, crushing entire families beneath tonnage of limestone. The technique requires you to select each stone by instinct, feeling for the perfect match with your palms, learning to read the grain and weak points by touch alone. Your stomach growls. You've eaten nothing but boiled roots and dried meat for 3 days, saving the good food for the children and fighters. But hunger sharpens your focus. You watch as Gorak demonstrates the ancient art of dry stone walling, how to tilt each stone slightly inward, creating a batter that will stand for millennia. He shows you the crucial placement of through stones, massive blocks that run the entire width of the wall, tying the whole structure together, like the bones of a giant beast. In the distance, a scout's horn sounds 3 short blasts. The raiders are closer than expected. Your peaceful morning of learning transforms into desperate preparation. You feel the ground vibrate beneath your feet as 20 clan members haul the cornerstone into position using log rollers. Each log has been carefully selected, stripped of bark, and greased with animal fat to reduce friction. You're part of the rope team, your hands bleeding through the rough fibers as you pull in unison to the chant leader's rhythm. The stone weighs as much as a fully grown aurochs, and one slip means death for whoever stands in its path. You've already seen 2 men lose fingers this morning, When a rope snapped and the safety logs failed to hold, the healer tends to them with poultices of crushed herbs and prayers to spirits you hope are listening. Your engineering knowledge, primitive as it may seem, represents thousands of years of trial and error, paid for in blood and suffering. You understand leverage points, weight distribution, and the critical importance of the foundation trench, which must be dug down to bedrock, or the first winter frost will heave your walls apart. The women and children work alongside you, carrying smaller stones and preparing the sacred mixture of clay and crushed shells that will fill the gaps. Everyone contributes, or everyone dies. It's that simple. As the cornerstone finally settles into place with a grinding thud that you feel in your chest, a small cheer goes up, quickly silenced as work continues. You venture into the sacred quarry at dawn, where your people have been extracting stones since before memory began. The rock face bears the scars of countless generations. Grooves where wooden wedges were hammered, blackened patches where fire setting cracked the stone, and the ancient carved symbols that mark successful extraction points. You carry the tools of your trade, antler picks worn smooth from use, wooden wedges soaked in water to expand, and fire-hardened wooden mallets that will splinter after a day's work. The technique you're about to employ seems impossible. Splitting a 10-ton boulder with nothing but wood, water, and patience. But you've learned the stone's secret language. You can see the fault lines, the natural bedding planes where the rock wants to break. With your antler pick, you carefully carve a series of holes along this invisible seam. Into each hole, you hammer a dry wooden wedge. Then comes the magic. Water, poured slowly, causing the wood to swell with inexorable force. You hear the rock groan, a sound like the earth itself protesting. Hours pass. The sun climbs. More water, more waiting. Then, with a crack like thunder, the massive stone splits cleanly in two, ready to become part of your fortress. You touch the fresh surface reverently. You've just birthed building material from the bones of the earth. You witness the arrival of the tribal shaman, who must bless the foundation before another stone can be laid. She's ancient, perhaps 40 summers old, and carries the accumulated wisdom of every fortress ever built by your people. Her body is painted with sacred symbols using red ochre and white chalk, and she brings offerings: the skull of a wolf, bundles of sacred herbs, and most importantly, the foundation sacrifice. It's a young goat, its throat cut cleanly so its blood can soak into the earth, binding the spirits of the land to protect your walls. You watch, unsettled but understanding the necessity, as she buries Bronze Age artifacts, stolen in raids from distant advanced peoples, beneath where the gate will stand. She speaks in the old tongue, words you only half understand, calling upon the ancestors who built the first walls when the ice retreated. The ceremony takes until sunset, and no one is permitted to work during this time. You use the break to observe the landscape, planning where to position archer platforms and identifying natural defensive advantages. Your fortress isn't just walls. It's an entire defensive system, including ditches, ramparts, and carefully planned killing fields where attackers will be exposed to stones and spears from above. As darkness falls, the shaman declares the site blessed, and work can resume at dawn. You're selected for the most dangerous job of all, the high wall work where one wrong step means a fall that will shatter every bone in your body. 20 feet above the ground, you balance on wooden scaffolding made from lashed-together saplings that creak ominously with every movement. Your task is to position the capstones, the final layer that will prevent rainwater from seeping into the wall's core and freezing, which would destroy years of work in a single winter. Each capstone must overlap its neighbor perfectly, creating an impenetrable barrier. You work with Bren, whose father fell from these same heights last summer, and now drags a useless leg. The wind up here is vicious, threatening to tear you from your perch. Your safety equipment consists of a rope around your waist, tied to nothing, because there's nothing strong enough to hold a falling man. Below, workers prepare defensive positions, sharpened stakes hidden in pits, covered with branches and leaves. The fortress is taking shape, but at a cost measured in lives. You've lost 6 people so far. 2 to accidents, 1 to exhaustion, 3 to a raid while the walls were still too low to defend. Yet you continue, because the alternative is extinction. As you lower another capstone into place, you hear thunder in the distance, but the sky is clear. Then you realize it's not thunder, it's war drums. You participate in your first raid defense, and the fortress walls you've been building are about to be tested in blood. The enemy clan has arrived. 300 warriors armed with flint-tipped spears and stone axes. You're stationed at a critical weak point, where the wall is only chest high, still under construction. Your weapons are pathetically simple. A pile of throwing stones, a wooden spear with a fire-hardened point, and the stone hammer you've grown so familiar with. But you have advantages the attackers don't: elevation, prepared positions, and intimate knowledge of every stone in these walls. The first assault comes at dawn. You watch warriors charge across the killing field you helped design, their war cries echoing off the stone. They hit the first trap, a concealed ditch filled with sharpened stakes. Screams pierce the air as men fall onto the points, but more keep coming. You begin throwing stones, each one selected for weight and balance, your construction experience making you deadly accurate. A stone the size of your fist caves in a warrior's skull. Another breaks an arm, rendering a spear useless. Around you, your clan fights with desperate efficiency. Boiling water, heated over fires you've maintained all night, pours down on attackers attempting to scale the walls. The fortress holds, but barely. When the enemy finally retreats, you count 17 dead among your people. The walls are blood-stained, but standing. You survey the damage after the raid, and the real work begins. Repair and reinforcement. The enemy managed to dislodge several crucial stones before being repelled, and now there's a breach that could prove fatal if they return. You work through exhaustion that makes your vision blur, mixing clay with animal blood and hair to create a primitive mortar that will hold temporarily. Your hands are so damaged from the fight and subsequent labor that you can barely grip tools, but stopping means death for everyone. The women work alongside you, some nursing babies while hauling stones, their strength making the difference between survival and annihilation. You've learned that fortress building isn't just about stacking rocks. It's about understanding human nature, predicting where attacks will come, and building accordingly. Gorak, wounded but still directing work, teaches you about the psychological aspect of fortification. Make the walls look more imposing than they are. Create the illusion of greater numbers. Position scarecrows with spears at night. The enemy must believe that attacking you costs more than it gains. As you work, scouts report the enemy is regrouping, planning a second assault with allied clans. You have perhaps 3 days to turn your damaged fortress into something that can withstand a force twice the size. The old and young work through the night, and you realize this is how civilizations are born. Not in comfort, but in desperate necessity. You discover the concept of the gatehouse through brutal necessity. The simple gap in your walls where people enter has proven to be a fatal weakness. After watching enemy warriors nearly breach your defenses through the entrance, you work with Gorak to design something revolutionary. A fortified entrance with overlapping walls that creates a killing box. Any attacker who breaches the outer gate finds themselves trapped in a narrow space, surrounded by walls from which defenders can rain death. The construction requires you to partially demolish existing work, the heartbreaking decision when every stone represents days of labor. You implement a new technique learned from traders who've seen southern fortresses, corbelling, where each stone course projects slightly beyond the one below, eventually creating a roof without any supporting beams. It's dangerous work. One miscalculation and tons of stone will collapse. You've seen it happen at other sites. Entire families crushed in an instant. But the design is brilliant. Attackers must fight through multiple defensive positions, each one more deadly than the last. You incorporate murder holes, gaps in the ceiling through which defenders can drop stones or pour boiling substances. The entire structure takes 40 days to complete, during which you're attacked twice more. Each attack teaches you something new, and you modify the design accordingly, creating a death trap that will be copied by fortress builders for generations. You experience your first winter as a fortress builder, and nothing has prepared you for the unique challenges cold brings to stone construction. The freeze-thaw cycle is your enemy now, more insidious than any human raider. Water that seemed harmless in autumn has seeped into microscopic cracks in your stones, and now, expanding as it freezes, it's splitting them apart like a giant's fingers. You watch months of work crumble in days. The solution comes from an unlikely source. Old Mara, who's survived 60 winters, suggests packing the walls with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung before the first freeze. It's disgusting work, but the organic material provides insulation and flexibility, allowing the wall to shift slightly without catastrophic failure. You also learn about winter construction techniques, how to keep mortar from freezing by adding salt, precious and rare, obtained through trade, and how to protect working surfaces with temporary thatch covers. The cold makes every task harder. Stones that you could grip easily in summer become treacherous with ice. 3 workers have already fallen to their deaths. Food is scarce, and you're burning calories just staying warm. Yet work cannot stop. Intelligence suggests enemy clans are planning a winter assault, believing you'll be weak and unprepared. You'll prove them wrong, even if it means working with fingers too numb to feel the tools you're holding. You participate in the Great Stone Moving, where your entire clan attempts to position a monolithic gateway stone that will serve as both practical entrance and spiritual monument. This stone is special, a single piece of granite that took 8 months to quarry and shape, weighing more than 50 men. Moving it requires every able body in your settlement, plus allied clans who've been promised protection in exchange for labor. You've built a wooden sledge, reinforced with the precious bronze strips captured in raids, and created a track of logs extending from the quarry to your fortress, a distance of 2 miles. The movement will take 3 days if nothing goes wrong. Everything goes wrong. On the first day, the sledge breaks under the strain, and you must rebuild it while the stone sits precariously on a hillside. On the second day, rain turns the ground to mud, and the logs sink uselessly into muck. You adapt, laying down beds of gravel and broken pottery to create solid ground. By the third day, exhaustion has claimed several workers, but you're close. The final approach requires the stone to be raised 8 feet to sit atop the gateway pillars. Using a technique passed down from the ancestors who raised the ancient standing stones, you build an earthen ramp, hauling dirt basket by basket until you have an incline. As the sun sets on the third day, the gateway stone slides into position with a grinding sound that echoes across the valley, a declaration that your people will endure. You face a crisis that threatens everything. The sacred spring that supplies your fortress has been deliberately poisoned by enemy shamans who introduce diseased animal carcasses upstream. People are falling sick, and without clean water, your fortress becomes a death trap rather than sanctuary. You must engineer a solution using only primitive technology. Working with the clan's wisest members, you devise a filtration system that seems impossible. Layers of sand, gravel, and charcoal contained within a series of wooden frames. The charcoal must be specially prepared, burned from specific hardwoods in covered pits to create the right porosity. You dig new channels, lining them with clay to prevent seepage, redirecting water through your filters. It's not enough. People continue to sicken. Then Gorak remembers ancient knowledge. Boiling. But boiling water for an entire fortress requires massive amounts of fuel and containers. You organize a pottery workshop, teaching people to create large vessels that can withstand direct flame. You establish a rotation where water is continuously boiled in shifts, day and night. The wood consumption is devastating your forests, but it's survival. Slowly, the sickness retreats. You've learned a crucial lesson about fortress design. Walls mean nothing without secure water. You begin planning a covered well house, protected from sabotage, with multiple filtration stages. The engineering challenge is immense, but you've become more than a wall builder. You're a creator of living systems, understanding that a fortress must breathe, drink, and eliminate waste like a living organism. You witness the arrival of the Stone Singers, a mysterious group of travelers who possess knowledge your clan desperately needs. They claim to know the songs that make stones lighter, ancient, rhythmic chants that coordinate group lifting so perfectly that massive weights seem to float. Skeptical but desperate, you watch them demonstrate. 30 singers surround a 10-ton block, beginning a complex rhythm with drums made from hollow logs and stretched hide. The lead singer calls out tonal patterns that your workers match with their movements. Pull on the high note, rest on the low, shift on the middle tone. It's hypnotic, and impossibly, it works. The stone moves with an ease that defies your months of struggle. The science, though you don't understand it as such, is perfect synchronization, eliminating wasted effort. Every person pulls at exactly the same moment, with exactly the same force. The singers teach you more, how sound can test stone integrity. A ringing tone means solid stone. A dull thud indicates hidden cracks, and how acoustic chambers built into walls can amplify defenders' voices, making a small force sound like an army. You incorporate these innovations into your fortress design, creating echo chambers that carry commands instantly across the entire fortification. The singers stay for a full moon cycle, and in that time, your construction pace doubles. When they leave, heading to another desperate settlement, they've transformed not just your building techniques, but your understanding of what prehistoric engineering can achieve. You're forced to innovate when you discover that your fortress location, chosen for its defensive advantages, sits atop a hidden cave system. The ground suddenly collapses during construction, swallowing 2 workers and a week's worth of prepared stones. Rather than abandon the site, you decide to incorporate the caves into your defense. This requires skills no one in your clan possesses: underground engineering. You must learn by deadly trial and error. First, you explore the cave system using torches made from pine resin and animal fat, marking your path with charcoal symbols to avoid getting lost in the labyrinthine passages. You discover the caves extend beneath where your walls stand, creating a fatal weakness. Enemies could tunnel in, or worse, collapse your fortifications from below. The solution is ambitious. You'll turn weakness into strength by creating an underground defensive level. You shore up natural passages with stone pillars, learning how to identify load-bearing rock from that which can be safely removed. You create murder holes looking down into passages where invaders might travel, and stockpile stones above natural choke points. Most innovatively, you engineer collapsible sections, passages that appear stable but can be brought down with the removal of a single keystone, trapping or crushing enemies. The work is terrifying. Every sound could herald a cave-in. The darkness is absolute beyond your torchlight. But when complete, you've created the world's first multi-level fortification. You experience your first major structural failure, and it nearly destroys everything you've built. A section of wall 40 feet long and 15 feet high collapses without warning during the night, the thunderous crash awakening everyone in terror. 7 people are crushed, including Gorak's youngest son. In the torchlight, you see the cause. Water infiltration has washed away the foundation. The grief is overwhelming, but there's no time for proper mourning with enemies potentially watching. You must rebuild immediately, but better. This tragedy becomes your harsh teacher. You implement what you call the water law. Every stone must shed water away from the wall's core. You develop a primitive damp course using layers of birch bark and clay, creating a water-resistant barrier. Drainage becomes an obsession. You dig French drains, though you don't call them that, filled with gravel, leading water away from foundations. You crown the top of every wall so water runs off rather than pooling. The collapsed section is rebuilt with a slight backward lean, what you've learned to call a battered wall, which better resists the outward pressure of its own weight. You also institute the practice of night watches, specifically to listen for the telltale sounds of settling or cracking stone. The fortress that emerges from this disaster is stronger, incorporating hard-learned lessons paid for in blood. Each stone now represents not just labor, but accumulated wisdom about the eternal battle between human ambition and natural forces. You're visited by foreign traders who've traveled from the far south, bringing with them revolutionary knowledge. The concept of buttresses. These strange merchants, darker-skinned and speaking through interpreters, sketch diagrams showing how angled support walls can prevent the outward collapse that has plagued your construction. In exchange for furs and amber, they spend 3 days teaching you the mathematics of force distribution, though you understand it more as sacred geometry than science. Using knotted cords to maintain consistent angles, you build your first flying buttress, a stone arm reaching from the ground to support your highest wall. It looks wrong, unnatural, like a frozen giant pushing against your fortress. But it works. The wall that had been developing an alarming outward lean stabilizes immediately. Emboldened, you add buttresses to all vulnerable sections, creating a fortress that, from a distance, looks like it's growing stone wings. The traders also introduce you to the concept of crenellations, the tooth-like projections along wall tops that provide cover for defenders while allowing them to attack. You modify the design to suit your materials, creating merlons, the solid upright parts, wide enough to shelter 2 defenders. Between them, the crenels, gaps, are precisely sized to allow spear thrusts while minimizing exposure. Your fortress is evolving from a simple wall to a sophisticated military architecture that will influence defensive construction for millennia. You discover fire setting, the ancient technique of using thermal shock to split massive stones. The method is simple in concept, but deadly in execution. You build intense fires against rock faces, heating the stone until it glows faintly in the darkness. Then, at the critical moment, you throw cold water onto the superheated surface. The sudden contraction causes the stone to crack with explosive force, sometimes sending razor-sharp fragments flying like arrows. You've learned to read the stone's color in firelight. Too cool and nothing happens. Too hot, and the stone shatters uselessly into pebbles. The sweet spot produces clean breaks along predictable lines. This technique allows you to harvest stones from previously impossible locations, including a cliff face that provides a beautiful white limestone that makes your fortress visible for miles. A psychological weapon as powerful as any physical defense. But the work is incredibly dangerous. The heat is suffocating, and toxic gases from certain stones have killed workers who ventured too close too soon after cracking. You develop safety protocols. Animal bladders filled with water for emergency cooling. Designated safe zones marked with painted stones. And, most importantly, the fire setter's cloth. A wet hide that workers hold before their faces when approaching the heated rock. The fortress grows faster now, but the burn scars on your arms tell the price of this acceleration. You implement the tower system after watching enemy archers nearly overcome your walls by finding elevated positions in nearby trees. If they can gain advantage through height, so can you. But building upward presents challenges your horizontal construction hasn't prepared you for. The first attempt fails catastrophically. The tower leans, then topples, nearly crushing the main gate. You realize you need a wider base, tapering as it rises, like the sacred mountains themselves. Using a plumb line made from a stone tied to sinew, you ensure perfect verticality as you build. Each level must be slightly smaller than the one below, creating a stable cone of stone rising 30 feet into the sky. The engineering challenge of creating floors without proper beams seems insurmountable until you remember the corbelling technique. Each floor is actually a stone dome with a hole in the center for ladder access. The tower becomes a vertical fortress within your fortress, with its own water storage, clay pots on each level, weapon caches, and even a signal fire platform at the top. From this height, you can see enemy movements from 2 days away, and your archers can cover the entire fortress perimeter. The psychological impact is even greater. The tower makes your fortress look unconquerable, a stone finger pointing at the sky in defiance of any who would challenge you. Other clans begin sending delegations to learn your techniques, offering alliance rather than warfare. You face the challenge of creating gates that can withstand battering rams, massive tree trunks that enemy warriors use to smash through entrances. Your current wooden gates, though reinforced with stone bracing, shake dangerously with each impact during raids. The solution comes from combining materials in ways your ancestors never imagined. You create a composite gate, wooden core for flexibility, stone facing for strength, and most innovatively, a buffer zone filled with sand and gravel that absorbs impact energy. The construction requires precise coordination. First, you build 2 parallel wooden gates with a foot of space between them. This gap is filled with sand mixed with small stones, creating a shock-absorbing layer. The outer face is then covered with thin stone slabs, attached using an intricate system of wooden pegs driven into holes drilled with flint-tipped bow drills, a process that takes days for each hole. But the true innovation is the gate's mounting system. Instead of fixed hinges that transfer all impact force to the wall, you develop a pivoting system using rounded stones as ball bearings, allowing the gate to move slightly with each blow, dissipating energy. Above the gate, you position a massive lintel stone, with holes drilled through it. Murder holes through which defenders can pour boiling water or drop stones on attackers who get too close. The gate becomes nearly impregnable, forcing enemies to attempt climbing the walls instead, where your defenses are strongest. You undertake the monumental task of building a great hall within your fortress walls, a covered space large enough for the entire clan to gather during sieges. Without metal tools to shape massive roof beams, you must innovate. The solution is a technique learned from observing how rock formations create natural arches. You'll build a stone vault using nothing but carefully shaped blocks and temporary wooden supports. The process is nerve-wracking. First, you construct a wooden frame in the shape of the desired arch, what future builders will call centering. Every stone must be precisely shaped to fit its position in the curve, each one wider at the top than the bottom, creating the wedge shape that will lock them together. The keystone, the final piece that locks the entire arch, must be perfect. Too small and the arch collapses. Too large and it won't fit. You shape it over 3 days, constantly checking with templates made from bark. The moment of truth comes when you remove the wooden supports. Everyone evacuates the hall except you and Danu, who insist on staying to show faith in your work. As workers knock away the supports, the arch groans, settles slightly, then holds. The stones have found their balance, each one pressing against its neighbors in perfect equilibrium. The successful arch leads to more ambitious projects, barrel vaults, intersecting vaults, and eventually, a great hall that can shelter 200 people under stone that will stand for millennia. You confront a problem that threatens to starve your fortress before any enemy can breach it. Food storage. Your granaries, simple pits lined with stones, lose half their contents to moisture, rats, and rot. Watching your people grow thin, despite successful harvests, drives you to innovation. You design elevated storage chambers built into the fortress walls themselves, using techniques borrowed from bird nest observations. These chambers are reached by removable ladders, preventing rodent access. Each storage cell is lined with carefully selected flat stones, fitted so tightly that not even a beetle can squeeze through. But the true innovation is climate control. You create a double wall system with an air gap between inner and outer shells, providing insulation. Small holes at the bottom and top create convection currents, constantly circulating air to prevent moisture buildup. The grain is stored in clay vessels sealed with beeswax, then surrounded by aromatic herbs that repel insects. You also implement a rotation system, marking containers with symbols indicating harvest date, first in, first out, though you don't use those words. The engineering extends to defense. Each storage chamber has a single entrance that can be sealed with a precisely fitted stone, making it impossible for raiders to quickly loot your supplies. Some chambers are hidden entirely, their entrances disguised as solid wall. Your fortress can now withstand a year-long siege, making you nearly invincible to the traditional strategy of starving defenders into submission. You witness the arrival of something that will change fortress building forever. Copper tools, obtained through trade with distant mountain peoples who've learned to extract metal from green stones. The first copper chisel seems like magic compared to your flint tools. Where stone against stone might take an hour to create a simple groove, the copper chisel accomplishes it in minutes. But these tools are worth more than human lives. You have only 3 chisels and 2 hammers for the entire fortress. They're used exclusively for the most critical work, shaping keystones, creating precise joints, and carving the drainage channels that have proven so vital. You establish a tool guardian, someone who sleeps with the copper tools, never letting them from sight. The tools are resharpened using special stones, a skill only 2 people possess. When one chisel breaks, the clan mourns as if for a fallen warrior. You learn to maximize the tool's use, marking all cuts with charcoal first, ensuring no stroke is wasted. The copper tools allow you to attempt previously impossible techniques, cutting stone with undercuts that lock together like puzzle pieces, creating joints so tight that not even a knife blade can fit between stones. Your fortress begins to show a refinement that sets it apart from all others. The smooth, precisely fitted stones at critical points make it clear to any observer that this isn't just a pile of rocks. It's architecture. Perhaps humanity's first true architecture. You discover the defensive power of psychological warfare when you begin displaying the skulls of defeated enemies along your walls. But this evolves into something more sophisticated: acoustic warfare. You notice that certain wall configurations create echoes and amplifications that can be deeply unsettling. Working with the clan's drummers and hornblowers, You design resonance chambers built into the walls themselves. These stone amplifiers can make a single drum sound like 10, a war cry like 100 voices. During the next raid, you deploy this weapon to devastating effect. As enemies approach at night, they hear what sounds like an army preparing for battle. Drums, horns, war cries echoing from every direction. In reality, it's 5 musicians positioned at strategic acoustic points. The attackers, convinced they're outnumbered, retreat without ever testing your walls. This success leads to more experimentation. You create whisper galleries, curved wall sections where defenders can communicate across the entire fortress without shouting. You position warning bells, made from suspended stones that ring when struck, at acoustic focal points where their sound carries for miles. Most unnervingly, you design death pipes, hollow channels through the walls that create ghostly howling sounds when wind passes through them, convincing superstitious enemies that your fortress is protected by spirits. The psychological defenses prove as valuable as the physical ones, preventing many battles from ever beginning. You face your greatest test when an alliance of 5 enemy clans surrounds your fortress with a force of over 1,000 warriors. They've learned from previous failures and bring new weapons, siege towers made from lashed trees, protected battering rams, and most terrifyingly, fire arrows designed to ignite your wooden support structures. The siege lasts 20 days, and every engineering innovation you've implemented is tested to destruction. Your multi-level defenses prove their worth, as attackers who breach the outer wall find themselves trapped in killing zones. The water storage systems you built allow you to fight fires while maintaining drinking supplies. The acoustic chambers let you coordinate defense across the entire fortress despite the chaos of battle. On day 15, they attempt to tunnel under your walls, but hit the bedrock foundation you insisted on, despite the extra months of labor it required. Their tunnel collapses, burying dozens of warriors. Your towers allow archers to cover every approach, making their siege towers death traps. The hidden food stores ensure your people remain strong, while the attackers, having expected quick victory, begin to starve. On day 20, as dawn breaks, the enemy retreats. Your fortress stands bloodied but unbroken. Of the 300 defenders, 47 have died, but you've proven that stone, properly arranged by human ingenuity, can defeat any force. The victory establishes your clan as the regional power, and your fortress as the model for all future defensive structures. You begin the transformation from military fortress to proto-city as peace follows your decisive victory. The walls that once only sheltered warriors now protect craftsmen, and you must engineer civilian infrastructure. The first challenge is workshops, spaces where pottery, weaving, and tool-making can occur protected from weather, but with adequate ventilation for smoke and fumes. You design lean-to structures against the inner walls, using the fortress itself as one wall. The roofs are stone slabs laid at angles, overlapping like fish scales to shed rain. Each workshop has a specific engineered feature. Pottery workshops have underground kilns, with chimney channels built through the walls. Weaving areas have large windows facing north for consistent light, and the smithy, for the precious copper working, has a specialized ventilation system to prevent toxic fumes from accumulating. You create the first planned streets, passages wide enough for 2 people to pass while carrying loads, with drainage channels down the center. The engineering principle you've learned from fortress building, that every element must serve multiple purposes, applies here. Streets aren't just for walking, but for channeling rainwater away from foundations, providing fire breaks between structures, and allowing rapid military movement if the fortress is attacked. Your fortress is evolving into something unprecedented, a permanent, defended settlement that will grow into humanity's first cities. You undertake the sacred task of building a ritual chamber within the fortress, a space where the clan can conduct ceremonies that bind them to the land and ancestors. This requires engineering beyond the practical. You must create atmosphere, manipulate light and sound to invoke the divine. The chamber is circular, following the ancient belief that corners trap evil spirits. Building a circular structure with rectangular stones requires each block to be precisely angled, a task that pushes your mathematical understanding to its limits. You use a central stake with a rope to maintain perfect curvature, checking constantly as walls rise. The roof is the greatest challenge, a corbelled dome where each ring of stones projects slightly inward until they meet at a central opening, the spirit hole through which souls travel to the sky realm. The acoustic properties are carefully planned. The circular walls create a natural amplification, where a whisper at the center can be heard clearly at any point on the perimeter. You position special resonance stones, carefully selected for their ringing quality when struck, at cardinal points. When hit in sequence, they create harmonics that seem to come from the earth itself. The lighting is controlled through carefully positioned openings that track celestial events. During winter solstice, sunrise light strikes the altar stone directly. During summer solstice, the noon sun illuminates sacred symbols carved into the floor. This chamber becomes the heart of your fortress, proving that prehistoric engineering serves not just survival, but the human need for transcendence. You confront the challenge of expansion as your successful fortress attracts refugees from failed settlements. The population has tripled, but you cannot simply build new walls. You must integrate additions with existing defenses without creating weak points. The solution requires three-dimensional thinking that stretches your capabilities. You design concentric fortifications, rings within rings, each capable of independent defense. If the outer wall falls, defenders retreat to the middle wall. If that falls, the inner fortress remains. But this isn't simple multiplication. Each ring must be carefully integrated with overlapping fields of fire, shared water systems, and coordinated gates that can be sealed independently. The engineering complexity multiplies exponentially. Drainage from the inner fortress must pass under the middle and outer walls without creating vulnerable points. You develop a system of stone culverts with metal grates, made from precious copper, that allow water out, but prevent enemies from crawling through. The foundation work alone takes 3 months, as each wall needs its own deep foundation to prevent one collapse from triggering others. You implement building codes, standardized stone sizes, minimum wall thicknesses, mandatory inspection points. What started as emergency expansion becomes the blueprint for urban planning. The concentric design creates natural neighborhoods, markets in the safe middle ring, workshops in the outer ring where fire danger is less catastrophic. Your fortress has become a living organism, growing through cellular division while maintaining defensive integrity. You discover the principles of seismic resistance after a minor earthquake damages several wall sections. The earth tremor, though not catastrophic, reveals fatal flaws in rigid construction. Walls built as single monolithic structures crack and fail, while older sections built with irregular stones and flexible packing survive better. This observation revolutionizes your building philosophy. You begin incorporating intentional flexibility, controlled weak points that allow structures to move without catastrophic failure. Instead of fighting the Earth's movement, you learn to dance with it. You develop what you call breathing walls, structures with built-in expansion joints filled with crushed pottery and sand that can compress and expand. The technique requires precise engineering. Too much flexibility, and walls become unstable. Too little, and they shatter during tremors. You test designs by having teams of workers strike walls with synchronized hammer blows, simulating seismic waves. The successful designs incorporate multiple innovations: tapered walls that are wider at the base, corner reinforcements that act as shock absorbers, and most importantly, modular construction, where damage to one section doesn't cascade through the entire structure. You also implement emergency protocols, stone markers showing safe zones during earthquakes, stockpiled materials for rapid repairs, and most importantly, public education about earthquake-resistant construction that will save countless lives in generations to come. You perfect the art of camouflage architecture when scouts report a massive army approaching, larger than anything you've faced. Direct confrontation means annihilation, so you implement desperate deception. Your fortress must disappear. Working through 3 nights, you cover exterior walls with mud mixed with local vegetation seeds. Within days, fast-growing vines begin covering the stone. You construct false ruins outside your real walls, deliberately collapsed structures that suggest your fortress was abandoned after catastrophic failure. The details sell the deception: scattered human bones from ancient burials, broken pottery, signs of fire damage. Your actual entrances are hidden behind false wall sections that appear solid but pivot on hidden mechanisms. The entire clan learns to move in silence, cooking only at night, when smoke won't betray occupation. Children are trained to freeze instantly at warning signals. You engineer sound baffles, hanging hides, and strategic placement of soft materials that absorb noise. Most ingeniously, you create false tracks, leading away from the fortress, suggesting the population fled to distant hills. When the army arrives, their scouts find only ruins and ghosts. They camp nearby for 3 days, while your people barely breathe behind hidden walls. When they finally leave, seeking easier targets, you've proven that the greatest fortress is one that doesn't appear to exist. This technique of defensive invisibility becomes legendary, copied by settlements throughout the region. You engineer the impossible: a bridge fortress that controls the river crossing, extracting tolls from traders while defending against armies. The river is 40 feet wide, with a vicious current that has claimed many lives. Building in water requires techniques that push prehistoric engineering to its absolute limits. You begin in the dry season, when water is lowest, working day and night before floods return. First, you create cofferdams, temporary walls of stones and clay that redirect water around construction zones. These primitive dams leak constantly, requiring teams to bail water with clay pots in rotating shifts. For the bridge supports, you drive wooden piles deep into the riverbed, using a hammer system where 20 men lift and drop a massive stone weight in coordinated strikes. Each pile must be precisely positioned. The current will exploit any weakness. Around these piles, you build stone pillars, laying each block underwater using a technique learned through deadly trial and error. Stones are lowered on ropes, guided by swimmers who risk hypothermia and drowning with each placement. The bridge deck uses the arch principle, but modified for lateral stress from water flow. You create pointed pillars facing upstream, splitting the current like ship prows. The fortress elements are built into the bridge itself, towers at each end, a drawbridge section that can be raised using counterweights, and murder holes along the entire span. When complete, your bridge fortress controls all river trade, generating wealth that transforms your clan from survivors to power brokers. You witness the birth of architectural mathematics when a young apprentice named Tam discovers that certain proportions create inherently stable structures. She notices that walls built with height-to-thickness ratios following specific patterns never collapse, while others fail predictably. Using knotted cords as measuring devices, she develops what will be known thousands of years later as the golden ratio, though she calls it the harmony measure. This discovery transforms construction from intuition to science. Every stone placement can now be calculated for optimal stability. Tam creates wooden frames in these proportions that builders use as templates. The results are immediate and dramatic. Construction speed doubles as workers no longer need to constantly test and adjust. Structural failures become rare. The mathematics extends beyond simple ratios. TAM calculates load distributions, determining exactly how many support pillars are needed for a given roof weight. She develops formulas for arch construction, predicting precisely where each stone must be placed for perfect compression. Her wooden calculation boards, marked with symbols representing different measurements, become the fortress's most valuable tools after the copper implements. You establish a school where young builders learn these principles, creating the first engineering academy. Students practice on small models before touching real stones. The systematic approach to construction knowledge means techniques are no longer lost when masters die. The fortress built using TAM's mathematics stands straighter, stronger, and more beautiful than anything constructed before. You face an enemy you cannot fight with walls. Disease. A plague spreads through neighboring settlements, and you must engineer medical isolation without understanding germs. The solution requires redesigning your fortress for quarantine capabilities. You create separate zones with independent water supplies, preventing contamination spread. The engineering is complex: duplicate wells, separate drainage systems, and most challengingly, airlocks, double-door chambers where people can transition between zones without direct contact. These prehistoric airlocks use weighted stone doors that cannot both be opened simultaneously. A lever system ensures one door must close before the other opens. You implement the first sewage management system, recognizing that human waste near water supplies correlates with disease. Stone-lined channels carry waste to covered pits far from wells. The pits are regularly burned with sacred fires that you believe purify evil spirits, but actually destroy pathogens. Ventilation becomes critical. You design wind-catcher towers that direct fresh air through living spaces, while exhausting stale air through separate channels. The fortress is divided into cells that can be isolated instantly. When plague arrives, infected individuals are moved to quarantine zones with dedicated caregivers who don't interact with the general population. Your engineering saves the clan. While neighboring settlements lose half their population, your fortress loses less than a tenth. The medical infrastructure you've created becomes permanent, transforming your fortress into a center for healing as well as defense. You achieve the pinnacle of prehistoric chemistry when you discover concrete, though you call it stone that flows. The discovery is accidental. Lightning strikes a limestone storage area during a storm, creating intense heat that transforms the rock into a strange powder. When rain follows, the powder becomes a paste that hardens stronger than the original stone. You spend months experimenting, learning to create this miracle substance deliberately. The process requires precise temperatures, hot enough to transform limestone into quicklime, but not so hot it becomes useless. You build specialized kilns with controllable airflow using sliding stone dampers. The quicklime is dangerous. It burns skin and blinds eyes. Workers wear leather protection and handle it with wooden tools. Mixed with water, sand, and crushed pottery, it becomes a substance that can be shaped like clay, but hardens like stone. This revolutionary material transforms your construction capabilities. You can now create seamless joints, waterproof pools, and most amazingly, curved structures that would be impossible with cut stone. You cast entire wall sections by building wooden forms and pouring your concrete mixture inside. Complex decorative elements that would take months to carve can be molded in days. The fortress begins to show architectural elements of beauty, not just function. Spiral staircases, decorated archways, even primitive gargoyles that channel rainwater while intimidating enemies. Your concrete recipe becomes a closely guarded secret, worth more than all the copper tools in existence. You engineer a masterpiece of psychological torture, the labyrinth entrance. After capturing enemy scouts who successfully mapped your fortress defenses, you realize that conventional layouts are too predictable. The solution is controlled confusion. You redesign the entrance approach as a maze of false passages, dead ends, and killing zones that appears chaotic but follows precise defensive logic. Each wrong turn leads attackers deeper into trap systems. The true path changes regularly, using movable stone blocks on wooden rollers, ensuring that even captured defenders cannot reveal a permanent route. The psychological impact is devastating. Attackers entering the labyrinth face constant choices, each potentially fatal. False doors open onto pits, promising passages narrow until armored warriors become wedged. Acoustic engineering makes whispers from hidden defenders seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. You incorporate optical illusions, passages that appear straight but curve imperceptibly, leading invaders back where they started. Mirrors made from polished copper, your most precious resources, create false passages that warriors charge into, striking solid walls. The floor patterns use contrasting stones that in torchlight create vertigo and disorientation. Some sections have ceiling heights that force tall warriors to crouch, making combat impossible. The labyrinth breaks enemy morale before they ever reach the real defenses. Many refuse to enter after hearing survivors' tales of the maze that drives men mad. Your fortress becomes known as the Mind Breaker, avoided by all but the most desperate or foolish attackers. You undertake the construction of an underground water reservoir that will ensure survival through any siege. The project requires excavating a cavern large enough to hold water for 500 people for 6 months, a space larger than your Great Hall. The engineering challenges are staggering. First, you must find the right location. Solid rock that won't collapse, naturally water-resistant, positioned to collect runoff from rain. You discover a layer of clay beneath limestone that provides natural waterproofing. The excavation takes 2 years, with workers chipping away stone by stone, using fire setting and copper tools. Each removed stone becomes building material for above-ground structures. The reservoir design incorporates multiple innovations. A stepped filtration system, where water passes through sand, gravel, and charcoal before storage. Overflow channels to prevent catastrophic failure during heavy rains. And a clever extraction system, using counterweighted buckets, that allows water drawing without contaminating the supply. The ceiling requires your most advanced engineering, a series of intersecting arches that distribute the enormous weight of earth and fortress above. You leave strategic pillars of natural rock for additional support. The finished reservoir is a cathedral to water, its arched ceiling disappearing into darkness, the sound of dripping water echoing like prayers. Access is restricted to prevent sabotage, with the entrance hidden behind a false wall. This single project ensures your fortress can withstand any siege, no matter how long. You witness the evolution of your fortress into a center of learning as master builders from distant lands arrive to study your techniques. The exchange of knowledge requires creating demonstration walls, sections built using different techniques side by side for comparison. You construct a teaching amphitheater where apprentices can watch masters work while protected from falling stones. The knowledge transfer goes both ways. Southern builders bring techniques for earthquake resistance you've never seen. Flexible wooden frames within stone walls that allow controlled movement. Northern clans demonstrate ice construction, using frozen water as temporary mortar during winter building. Eastern traders introduce bamboo scaffolding, though you must substitute with local materials, allowing workers to reach heights previously impossible. You systematize this knowledge into building codes carved into stone tablets, permanent records that will survive even if the fortress falls. These tablets describe mixing ratios for concrete, standard measurements for stable walls, seasonal building schedules, and safety protocols. You establish a master builder certification system, Apprentices must complete test structures, demonstrating competence in foundation laying, arch construction, and defensive engineering before earning their mark. The fortress becomes a university of stone, where theoretical knowledge meets practical application. Students arrive as laborers and leave as engineers, spreading advanced building techniques across the prehistoric world. Your legacy isn't just the stones you've stacked, but the knowledge that ensures humanity will never again be defenseless. You face the ultimate test when the Earth itself rebels, a massive earthquake that would level ordinary structures. But your fortress, built with accumulated knowledge of generations, responds like a living thing. The flexible joints compress and expand, absorbing seismic energy. The tapered walls sway but don't topple. The arch-supported structures distribute forces rather than concentrating them. You watch in awe and terror as stones shift and grind, dust clouds rising, the sound like the earth screaming. But when the shaking stops, your fortress stands. Damaged, yes. Several wall sections need reconstruction. One tower has partially collapsed, but the core structures remain intact. The same cannot be said for neighboring settlements. Refugees arrive with tales of complete destruction. Entire clans buried under their own fortifications. Your fortress becomes a relief center, and you organize reconstruction efforts for the region. This disaster teaches final lessons about construction. You implement new standards. All critical structures must have multiple redundancies. Emergency shelter areas reinforced beyond normal requirements. And most importantly, regular structural inspections to identify weakness before catastrophe strikes. The earthquake also reveals hidden strengths. Some experimental techniques you thought were failures actually provided crucial flexibility. You document everything, creating the first disaster engineering manual. The rebuilt sections incorporate every lesson learned, making your fortress stronger than before. It's no longer just a defensive structure, but a testament to human resilience and adaptation. You achieve architectural poetry with the construction of the Star Chamber, an astronomical observatory built into your fortress's highest tower. This isn't mere decoration, but practical engineering for navigation, timekeeping, and agricultural planning. The chamber's design requires unprecedented precision. Every opening is calculated to frame specific celestial events. The north window perfectly captures the pole star. Eastern apertures track the sunrise throughout the year. A ceiling opening allows moonlight to strike marked floorstones, creating a lunar calendar. The construction challenges are immense. Each observation slot must be angled precisely, requiring mathematical calculations that push your understanding to its limits. You use water levels to ensure perfect horizontals, plumb lines for verticals, and, most innovatively, a shadowboard system to verify angles against the sun's known positions. The floor becomes a map of the heavens, with inlaid stones of different colors representing constellations. During certain alignments, light beams cross the chamber in patterns that predict seasonal changes. This knowledge proves invaluable for agriculture, allowing precise planting times that maximize harvests. The star chamber also serves defensive purposes. You can calculate exactly when night attacks are most likely based on moon phases, and use celestial navigation to coordinate with allied fortresses using signal fires. The chamber represents the synthesis of all your engineering knowledge: stone shaping, mathematical precision, astronomical observation, and practical application. It transforms your fortress from a mere defensive structure into a gateway between earth and sky. You engineer the impossible when tasked with creating a floating bridge section that can be removed during attacks but quickly replaced for allies. The river has become a highway for trade, but also a vulnerability. The solution requires understanding buoyancy and structural engineering beyond anything attempted before. You construct massive wooden pontoons, sealed with pine resin and tar, each capable of supporting enormous weight. These flotation devices are anchored to stone pillars on the riverbed, using bronze chains, representing your entire wealth in metal. The bridge deck consists of interlocking wooden sections, reinforced with stone ballast for stability. The genius is in the connection system, using a mortise and tenon design scaled to enormous proportions. Bridge sections lock together when in place, but can be disconnected quickly using lever mechanisms. During peaceful times, the bridge allows heavy trade wagons to cross. When threats appear, a team can dismantle the center section in minutes, creating an impassable gap while storing the floating sections safely against the shore. The engineering extends underwater. You've developed diving bells, inverted clay pots that trap air, allowing workers to descend and maintain the underwater anchor points. These prehistoric submariners can work for minutes at depths that would normally be impossible. The floating bridge becomes a symbol of your fortress's evolution, from isolated stronghold to commercial hub, controlling trade while maintaining security. You revolutionize fortress warfare with the invention of the stone thrower, a primitive catapult that multiplies human strength through mechanical advantage. The design comes from observing how bent trees snap back when released, but scaling this to siege weapons requires unprecedented engineering. The frame must withstand forces that would shatter ordinary constructions. You use the largest oak beams available, joined with bronze reinforcements at stress points. The throwing arm is a single tree trunk, selected for straightness and flexibility. The challenge is creating consistent tension. You develop a windlass system using twisted sinew ropes that store energy like springs. The mathematics of trajectory requires extensive experimentation. You build a calibration range where different weights and release angles are tested, marking successful combinations on wooden boards. The ammunition isn't random stones, but carefully shaped projectiles, each weighing exactly the same for predictable flight. The psychological impact exceeds the physical damage. Enemies approaching your walls now face death from above at ranges they thought safe. The distinctive creaking of the windlass being wound, snenators running for cover. You position multiple throwers around the fortress, creating overlapping fields of fire. The machines require specialized crews who understand not just operation, but maintenance. Sinew ropes must be protected from moisture, wooden components regularly treated with oils to prevent cracking. The stone thrower transforms siege warfare from close-quarters brutality to long-range engineering contest, where mathematical precision defeats numerical superiority. You create the first industrial production facility when demand for building stones exceeds what traditional quarrying can supply. The solution requires mechanizing processes that have always been manual. You design an assembly line where each worker performs one specialized task, multiplying efficiency. The quarry is reorganized with permanent wooden crane structures, using counterweights to lift stones that previously required dozens of workers. Specialized teams handle different operations. Rock face markers identify optimal splitting points. Fire setters create thermal fractures. Water carriers operate the thermal shock process, and shapers prepare rough blocks for transport. The innovation extends to transportation. You build permanent wooden rails lubricated with animal fat, allowing single workers to move weights that previously required teams. Standardization becomes crucial. Stones are cut to modular sizes that fit predetermined wall patterns, eliminating on-site customization. Quality control emerges naturally. Inspectors mark stones with symbols indicating grade and intended use. Defective stones aren't discarded, but sorted for different purposes: fill material, road construction, or crushing for concrete aggregate. The facility operates continuously in shifts, maximizing output while preventing worker exhaustion. This industrial approach produces stones faster than they can be placed, creating stockpiles that allow rapid construction when needed. Other settlements send delegations to learn your methods, trading resources for production knowledge. Your fortress has evolved from consumer to producer, generating wealth through engineering efficiency rather than military might. You face your greatest challenge when tasked with building a monument that will outlast the fortress itself. A victory tower commemorating the alliance of tribes that ended generations of warfare. This structure must embody everything you've learned about engineering, while reaching heights that seem to defy prehistoric capabilities. The tower will stand 100 feet tall, tapering from a 40-foot base to a 10-foot summit. The mathematics alone requires months of calculation. You create scale models, testing different proportions until finding the perfect balance between stability and grandeur. The foundation requires excavation to bedrock, then building up with increasingly massive stones to distribute the unprecedented weight. Construction introduces new challenges. At these heights, wind becomes a serious force. You design the tower with calculated spiral grooves that channel wind around rather than against the structure. Each stone is shaped with interlocking features that prevent any single piece from working loose. Scaffolding becomes architecture itself, a wooden exoskeleton that rises with the tower, incorporating platforms, pulleys, and safety features learned through decades of dangerous high work. The lifting system employs multiple innovations: compound pulleys that multiply force, counterweight elevators for workers, and most impressively, a crane that pivots atop the rising structure, capable of placing stones anywhere on the construction face. The human cost is significant. 3 workers fall to their deaths despite safety measures. But the tower rises, a testament to human ambition and engineering skill that will stand for millennia. You implement the final evolution of fortress design, transformation into a living city that no longer needs walls for definition. The defensive structures remain, but become integrated into civilian architecture. Former battlements become market spaces. Watchtowers transform into residential complexes. Murder holes are converted to ventilation systems for workshops below. This transition requires reimagining every military feature for peaceful purposes. The great gates, once barriers against enemies, become ceremonial entrances decorated with carved histories of the clan. The underground tunnels designed for ambush become cool storage areas for food and trade goods. The acoustic chambers that once carried battle commands now amplify musicians during festivals. You design public spaces that would have been unthinkable during siege years. Open plazas for gatherings, gardens growing on former defensive earthworks, even a primitive aqueduct bringing fresh water from distant springs. The engineering challenges of peace prove as complex as those of war. Waste management for a permanent large population requires sophisticated drainage. Building codes must ensure structures don't compromise remaining defenses. Most importantly, you must plan for growth while maintaining the option to return to full defensive posture if threats re-emerge. The city that emerges represents humanity's transition from survival to civilization. Your engineering has created not just safety, but the space for art, trade, and learning to flourish. You undertake your final project, documenting everything you've learned for future generations. The knowledge archive requires permanent recording methods that will survive centuries. You create stone tablets inscribed with building techniques, mathematical formulas, and engineering principles. But stone alone isn't enough. You develop a 3-dimensional teaching system using scale models that demonstrate construction techniques. These models, built from the same materials as full-size structures, show cross-sections of walls, arch construction, and foundation systems. Each model is stored in specially designed chambers within the fortress walls, protected from weather and accessible to future students. You establish an oral tradition, creating memorable songs that encode critical engineering knowledge. These songs, passed to children from birth, ensure knowledge survives even if written records are lost. The archive includes failure documentation, detailed records of what doesn't work and why, saving future builders from repeating costly mistakes. You create material samples showing degradation over time, teaching about maintenance and longevity. Most importantly, you establish the principle that knowledge must be shared. The archive is open to all, even former enemies. You understand that advancing human capability to build and protect benefits everyone. As you place the final stone in the archive chamber, you realize your greatest construction isn't the fortress itself, but the systematic preservation of knowledge that will allow others to build even greater things. You stand on the highest tower as the sun sets on your life's work, now an old master, watching the next generation continue building. The fortress that began as desperate stones piled against raiders has become a city of 10,000 souls, a center of learning and trade, a beacon of civilization in a primitive world. Young Danu, now grey-haired and bent from decades of labor, stands beside apprentices who will surpass everything you've achieved. They discuss plans for structures you can barely imagine, bridges spanning impossible distances, towers reaching toward clouds, underground complexes extending like root systems. The view from here shows the full evolution. The original rough walls now barely visible beneath sophisticated additions. The labyrinth entrance now a historical curiosity, as peace has made such defenses obsolete. The great hall where desperate councils once planned survival, now hosting wedding celebrations. You see children playing where blood once soaked the ground. Merchants haggling where warriors once died. Scholars studying in chambers that once stored weapons. The stones themselves tell the story. Rough-hewn blocks from desperate early days. Precisely fitted stones from the period of copper tools. Smooth concrete sections from your chemical discoveries. And now, new constructions using techniques you don't fully understand, but made possible by the foundation you laid. As darkness falls and torches illuminate the city, you realize your true achievement. You've proven that humans can shape stone, and stone can shape humanity, creating structures that protect not just bodies, but dreams, ambitions, and the accumulated knowledge that defines civilization. The fortress will outlive you by millennia, but more importantly, the engineering principles you've discovered and documented will spread across the world, allowing countless communities to build their own safety and prosperity. This is how prehistoric Europeans built fortresses without metal tools, with ingenuity, sacrifice, accumulate. And now, as old Danu's story comes to rest, so should you. The stones are all in place. The fortress stands complete. The knowledge has been passed on. You've witnessed how your ancestors transformed from vulnerable beings into master builders, using nothing but stone, wood, and human ingenuity. Every modern city owes its existence to these prehistoric pioneers who proved that humans could reshape their world. Their average life expectancy was just 35 years. Most children didn't survive to adulthood. A simple infected cut meant death. Yet they built structures that have outlasted empires. Some of their fortresses still stand today, 7,000 years later. Their stones still perfectly fitted, their walls still strong. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind rest on this thought. You carry their legacy in your bones. The same hands that struggled with rough stone evolved to type on keyboards. The same minds that calculated load-bearing weights now design skyscrapers. The same determination that refused to yield to raiders now reaches for the stars. The fortress builders are your ancestors, Their struggles purchased your comfort. Their innovations laid the foundation for everything you take for granted. Walls that keep you safe, roofs that shelter you from storms. The very concept that humans can build rather than simply endure. So dim the lights completely now. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of ancient work songs. Feel the warmth of your modern comfort, purchased with prehistoric blood and genius. And know that you rest tonight in safety because 7,000 years ago, someone decided that humans deserved better than fear. Sleep well, descendant of builders. Dream of stones perfectly placed. And wake tomorrow to add your own stone to humanity's endless construction. Good night.